A week after the announcement of AUKUS, Australia finds itself at the forefront of world politics in a way it has never before been. Frozen out in Europe, fated in Washington, alarming some of its Southeast Asian neighbors, and backed in by the Quad, these are unfamiliar times for little old Australia. England's Deputy Chief Medical Officer Professor Jonathan Van Tam said the UK was likely to be in for a bumpy winter with COVID, coupled with other respiratory viruses, such as flu, returning. Previously, lockdowns and social distancing meant these were kept at very low levels.
Football has been at the forefront of this trend. In a recent column, a perceptive observer highlighted the odd existence of the digital football supporter who doesn't care about football. Retweeting the piece, a British journalist critiqued the phenomenon of actual football being just an audition for the real business of transfers. The World Health Organization, WHO, on Wednesday, released its revised Global Air Quality Guidelines, AQGs, its first update since 2005. The new AQGs provide an assessment of the health effects of air pollution, set new thresholds for key air pollutants, and provide recommendations to improve air quality. If 90% of the 5+ population was reached, however, around 85% of the full population, then deaths would drop to around 50 over a year. This would make ending restrictions very difficult without very high vaccination rates, should the Delta outbreak not be stamped out in Auckland. Auckland is currently under Level 3 restrictions, while the rest of the country is on Level 2. The aim is to reduce waste by encouraging consumers to reuse existing chargers when buying a new device. All smartphones sold in the EU must have USB-C chargers, the proposal said. Apple has warned such a move would harm innovation. The tech giant is the main manufacturer of smartphones using a custom charging port. In an interview with the Associated Press news agency, Mullah Nuruddin Turbi dismissed outrage over the Taliban's executions in the past, which sometimes took place in front of crowds at a stadium, and he warned the world against interfering with Afghanistan's new rulers. Footprints dating back 23,000 years have been discovered in the United States, suggesting humans settled North America long before the end of the last ice age, according to researchers. The findings announced on Thursday. Low Earth orbit is now more accessible for more people to experience the wonders of space, tweeted NASA Administrator Bill Nelson, who was a congressman when he hitched a ride on a space shuttle decades ago.
Another experiment sponsored by the European Space Agency, the European Astronaut Centre and the German Aerospace Centre's Institute of Space Medicine will use a small device to take images of the retinas of astronauts' eyes to check them for spaceflight-associated neuroocular syndrome, SANS. In a landmark report published on Monday, the international financial institution called on states to reduce global emissions and bridge the development gap to avoid the effects of slow-onset climate change such as water scarcity, decreasing crop productivity, and rising sea levels. Sub-Saharan Africa has been identified as the most vulnerable region due to desertification, fragile coastlines and the population's dependence on agriculture. Up to 86 million people are projected to move within national borders in the worst-case scenario. Responding to the criticism over rising prices and protests by university students, Turkish president told reporters last week his government was taking action against price gouging, and had built a significant number of dormitories and increased scholarships for students. Just as the world's fifth-largest economy emerges from the COVID-19 pandemic, the post-Brexit shortage of truck drivers and a spike in European natural gas prices has left the UK grappling with the grim prospect of a potential food supply crunch and soaring energy bills. Given the gravity of the circumstances that led to Mr. Trump's suspension, we believe his actions constituted a severe violation of our rules which merit the highest penalty available under the new enforcement protocols, Facebook Vice President of Global Affairs Nick Clegg said in a statement.
As a young boy, Narendra Damodar Modi helped his dad serve tea in Gujarat's Vadnagar railway station. At the age of 63, and as leader of India's Hindu nationalist Bharatiya Janata Party, He has become the Prime Minister of the world's largest democracy.
The World Health Organization, WHO, on Wednesday, released its revised Global Air Quality Guidelines, AQGs, its first update since 2005. The new AQGs provide an assessment of the health effects of air pollution, set new thresholds for key air pollutants, and provide recommendations to improve air quality.
To construct 3D printed a home, the building is first designed digitally. Designers determine which aspects of the house can be 3D printed, typically, its parts like foundations and walls made of concrete, a material that lends itself well to 3D printing. The instructions are then sent to a robotic printer, which can either build the elements at the construction site or elsewhere.
A conspiracy theory linking 5G technology to the outbreak of the coronavirus is quickly gaining momentum, with celebrities including actor Woody Harrelson promoting the idea. But the theory is also getting a boost from what some researchers say is a coordinated disinformation campaign. The study, released on Tuesday by scientists from several Australian universities, said 2.46 billion reptiles, 180 million birds, 143 million mammals and 51 million frogs were harmed in the blazes that ripped through the country. The study, released on Tuesday by scientists from several Australian universities, said 2.46 billion reptiles, 180 million birds, 143 million mammals and 51 million frogs were harmed in the blazes that ripped through. High-flying shares of Apple Incorporated and Tesla Incorporated surged again on Monday as stock splits took effect and attracted more buying from investors. Opinion polls had earlier forecast the coalition would fall short of a majority, but a surge in support for the center-right Progressive Party, which won 5 more seats than in 2017, pushed its total count to 37 seats in the 63-seat Parliament Althingi, according to state broadcaster RÚV. The British High Commission supported the tour, did not advise against it on security grounds, and our travel advice for Pakistan has not changed, Christian Turner said. This was a decision made by the ECB, which is independent of the British government based on concerns for players' welfare.
The Olympic Park has hosted a few sporting events and even Rock in Rio. The initial project planned to build 4 schools from the dismantling of the Arena of the Future, where the handball competitions took place, has not been delivered and the venue is still standing.
AstraZeneca plc's coronavirus shot could be ready for large-scale vaccinations as early as this year, Chief Executive Officer Pascal Soriot said, dismissing reports of delays and production snags.
The Securities and Exchange Commission (SEC) has charged that Stanford operated a massive Ponzi scheme by paying investors returns on deposit certificates using money from other investors rather than any investment gains. Australia is due to begin the first big public phase of vaccine distribution on Monday, although the program has slipped behind the government's announced timetable due to supply and delivery issues. Health officials have said the rain and floods will delay the already halting rollout of coronavirus vaccines in Sydney and surrounding areas.
Billionaire entrepreneur Elon Musk's company, SpaceX, launched 60 more Starlink satellites into low Earth orbit on Monday, clinching a new title, the most satellites operated by a single company. SpaceX's colorful founder intends for Starlink to provide global high-speed internet.
Britain. Roger Penrose, a professor at the University of Oxford, will receive half of this year's prize for the discovery that black hole formation is a robust prediction of the general theory of relativity.
The acclaimed British scientist Stephen Hawking has put forward a theory that could resolve one of the most significant paradoxes facing theoretical physicists: what happens to physical information after it enters a black hole? China has set up labs to analyze the samples for age and composition and is also expected to share some of them with other countries, as was done with the hundreds of kilograms brought back by the US and the former Soviet Union. The United Nations is calling for a full investigation into evidence of corruption and illegality involving the Bangladesh army, which was exposed during an investigation released by Al Jazeera on Monday. The corruption involves Bangladesh's Chief of Army Staff, General Aziz Ahmed, who is due to meet senior UN officials in New York next week. Australia's Immigration Minister Alex Hawke has granted 12-month bridging visas to 3 members of the Sri Lankan Tamil family at the heart of a growing campaign urging the government to allow them to stay permanently in Australia. The visas apply to parents Nadesalingam and Priyamurthapan, and their eldest daughter Kopika. Greenpeace said that last year 79 of the world's 100 most populous cities had annual mean PM 2.5 air pollution levels that breached the 2005 guidelines, according to data from IQ Air. With the tightening of the guidelines, 92 would be in breach, it said. The politicians, among them former Indian Prime Minister H.D. Gowda and one of the key allies of the present state government, chide the infotech industry for complaining too much and not giving back enough to the city that has been a lucrative base to them for more than a decade now. The average September temperature in Toronto is 21 C, but in this humid continental climate, the highest recorded since 1840 has been 37.8 C. That was missed by a few degrees, but 33.6 C, as felt on Sunday, seems to be the hottest September day in 126 years. Tens of thousands of environmental activists, including Greta Thunberg, the face of a global youth climate movement, have staged a rally outside Germany's parliament ahead of the general election this weekend to demand that politicians take stronger action to curb climate change. Earlier on Tuesday, two state-owned hospitals in Berlin announced that they had stopped giving AstraZeneca's coronavirus vaccine to female staff members below 55 years old. The heads of 5 university hospitals in Western Germany called for a temporary halt to the vaccine for all younger women, citing the potential risk of blood clots. Reporters Without Borders, RSF, has urged Israel to suspend exports of spying technology amid allegations it was used to target more than a dozen heads of state and hundreds of journalists. Earlier this week, a list was leaked of some 50,000 phone numbers believed to have been chosen by clients of Israel's NSO group for possible surveillance. Australian scientists say they have developed pain-free blood sugar testing for diabetics, a non-invasive strip that checks glucose levels via saliva. For diabetics, managing their blood sugar levels typically means pricking their fingers multiple times a day with a lancet and then placing a drop of blood on a testing strip. Tourist numbers have dropped significantly in India after a wave of protests against a new citizenship law. Police in Agra, India, estimates that about 200,000 domestic and international tourists have cancelled or postponed their trips to the Taj Mahal in the past 2 weeks. The Bank of England has removed 10 oil paintings and busts of 7 governors and directors who had known connections to the slave trade in the 18th and 19th centuries, it said on Friday. Following the Black Lives Matter protests last year, the British Central Bank had said it would review its art collection. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has assured farmers that reforms in the agrarian sector were aimed at helping them, as thousands of farmers continue their protests against 3 new laws to overhaul the procurement and sale of produce. Reforms will help draw investment in agriculture and benefit farmers, Modi said. The European Union drug regulator has said it has come to a clear scientific conclusion that the AstraZeneca-Oxford vaccine is safe and effective after several, mostly European, countries suspended its use following reports of blood clots among some recipients. Over half of Mexico's prisons are overcrowded and many are understaffed. Few prisoners take part in rehabilitation programs and nearly a third reoffend when they are released. Now one program, which was started by a non-profit theater company, is trying to change that trend. The dark side of green energy is about how the world may be creating a huge dependence on rare materials and minerals, and whether the promise of a clean, green world will turn out to be a myth with fresh challenges to our society and environment. The African continent is also part of this growing electric-powered transport wave. Several African countries such as Kenya and Rwanda have adopted tax incentives to encourage electric vehicle imports and are working on developing their own electric 2- and 3-wheelers. Sweden, which has shunned the strict lockdowns that have choked much of the global economy, emerged from 2020 with a smaller increase in its overall mortality rate than most European countries, an analysis of official data sources showed. (101) East explores methamphetamine abuse in Australia, often resulting in violent assaults and mental health breakdowns. Rising crime rates are the tip of an insidious iceberg, as methamphetamine abuse cases soar in Australia. The methamphetamine drug called ice is the drug of choice among young people, and so powerful that it can take just one hit for its users to become addicted. Denmark's government has said it is joining forces with businesses to develop a digital passport that would show whether people have been vaccinated against the coronavirus, allowing them to travel and help ease restrictions on public life. Finance Minister told a news conference on Wednesday that in 3-4 months, a digital corona passport will be ready for use in
A surge in demand for building, combined with supply constraints, blamed on the effects of the coronavirus pandemic, have sent prices for timber, cement and other essential supplies shooting higher. But builders and their clients have little choice but to pay up if they want to get the job done. In a culmination of years of efforts to rein in the sector, 10 powerful Chinese government bodies including the central bank, said overseas exchanges were barred from providing services to mainland investors via the internet, a previously grey area, and vowed to jointly root out illegal cryptocurrency activities. Makers of high-performance electric cars will ultimately have to find ways to develop lighter, more powerful batteries. But as today's battery technology cannot compete with the sustained power of a petrol engine, they are also rethinking everything from electric motors to car body materials. Recovering from chemotherapy during lockdown, Stu Prince found a new mission, reuniting old postcards he'd found at online auctions with their owners. With one card in particular, he helped revive memories that had been buried for decades. A rug covered the floor and cushions ran along the walls that were at least 2 feet thick. A few treasures were on display. A small cabinet with half a dozen tiny colored glass bottles. But the family are poor, and any possessions they had were destroyed or looted during the last 20 years of war. India's Maharajas or rulers of princely states are commonly viewed through stereotypes of elephants, dancing girls, and grand palaces. Historian Manu Pillai revisits their legacy. If you look beyond the bejeweled figures, palaces and opulent courts, you'll notice something telling about India's Maharajas, that they have largely been scorned and mocked, or treated with voyeuristic curiosity. The Dalai Lama is backing efforts to save a Scottish cafe inspired by a promise a Tibetan woman made him almost 20 years ago. Rekha Gower, 39, opened the Himalaya Cafe in Edinburgh after a chance meeting with the spiritual leader at the Scottish Parliament in 2004. He asked her to stay in Scotland and promote their culture.
By the middle of the 21st century, a team of fully autonomous humanoid robot soccer players shall win a soccer game, complying with the official rules of football governing body, FIFA, against the winner of the most recent World Cup. The body's normal temperature is 37-38 C, but if it heats up too much, 40-41 C, you may find yourself getting heat stroke. At that point, your heat regulatory system can, essentially, pack in, which stops you from sweating, as your body tries to keep water around your vital organs. In an interview, Scott Morrison said he had not made any final decisions on attending, suggesting it was a burden. "It's another trip overseas. And I've spent a lot of time in quarantine," he told a West Australian newspaper. The COP26 summit will be the biggest global climate crisis talks in years. The government is to suspend competition law to allow oil firms to target fuel deliveries at petrol stations following recent panic buying. Officials said the move would make it easier for companies to share information and prioritize parts of the country most at need. It follows days of long queues at the pumps, after fears of disruption to the fuel supply sparked panic buying. For many across the continent, it's the challenge of accessing any energy supply at all. Some 600 million people in Africa don't have access to energy, limiting their ability to start and run businesses. Even in the megacities of South Africa and Nigeria, businesses have to deal with rolling power blackouts. So governments, entrepreneurs and innovators are working to fix this. Jennifer Harley, people business partner at Group, says that sleep support will continue to be a critical aspect of the company's health and well-being program. When we don't have enough sleep, we don't bring our best selves to work, so we need to invest in well-being, she says. Businesses should care about the impact of having people who are happy, healthy and well slept. The UK's caffeine addiction sees us drink around 35 billion cups a year, but that comes at a huge environmental cost. We throw away more than 2.5 million disposable coffee cups annually, and around 500,000 tons of ground coffee waste goes to landfill. Investing in education in the world's poorest countries is the single best investment we can make in the future of humanity, Boris Johnson told a global education summit in London. World leaders pledged more than $4 billion, £2.9 billion, to support schools through the Global Partnership for Education. Three Chinese astronauts have returned to Earth after completing the country's longest crewed space mission. They spent 90 days at the Tianhe module on China's space station, some 380 kilometers, 240 miles, above Earth. The three men had on Thursday boarded the Shenzhou 12 crewed spacecraft and undocked from the space station. Almost two-thirds of Swiss voters have backed same-sex marriage in a referendum. Some 64% supported the measure, making it one of the last countries in Western Europe to legalize same-sex marriage. Campaigners have hailed the vote as a historic moment for LGBT rights in the country.
Five Palestinians have been killed during raids by Israeli forces in the West Bank. The Israeli army said the operation was against Hamas militants about to carry out attacks, adding that as far as it knew all the dead were Hamas members. 2 soldiers were seriously injured by Palestinian gunfire in one of the raids, it said. Wastewater treatment plants release microplastics into the environment, where they accumulate and pose a threat to wildlife. But by studying the way a manta ray feeds on plankton, scientists in the U.S. have designed a filtration system that captures the tiny fragments without getting clogged. Japan's famous bullet train used to make a loud boom when it traveled through tunnels. But, thanks to a spot of birdwatching, an engineer was able to fix the problem after he was inspired by a kingfisher.
Untreated sewage leads to poor sanitation and disease around the world. Its effects are felt strongly in India, and Bangalore resident Tarun Kumar turned to cows for a solution. With help from the Biomimicry Institute, he has designed and built 50 sustainable sewage plants that work in a similar way to a cow's stomach. The system has no moving parts, so doesn't require any power or people. A 12-year-old boy in the Dutch city of Groningen has won a court battle to get vaccinated against COVID-19 so that he can visit his dying grandmother, despite his father's objections. A judge ruled the jab would reduce his chances of passing on any infection to the woman, who has advanced cancer. Shanti Devi, a government community health worker in India's northern state of Uttar Pradesh, died from COVID in May. Her daughter Malti Gangvar said that in the days following her death, the family received several calls from the health department offering condolences. Her late mother's colleagues even urged her to apply for the same job. The operator behind COVID-19 vaccine cards took just seconds to reply. One of a slew of Instagram accounts hawking fake proof of COVID-19 vaccination cards, whoever was running the page was eager to sell, inviting the BBC to move over to an encrypted messaging app to make a deal. As the Delta variant of coronavirus sweeps the U.S., businesses, universities and cities such as New York and San Francisco have introduced vaccine mandates to boost uptake of jabs. But vaccine hesitancy remains high and a cottage industry for bogus inoculation cards has emerged to help people get around the rules. Residents in northeast China are experiencing unannounced power cuts, as an electricity shortage which initially hit factories spreads to homes. People living in Liaoning, Jilin and Heilongjiang provinces have complained on social media about the lack of heating, and lift and traffic lights not working. The ability to remotely access a phone was once considered something only a handful of countries could do. But the technology has advanced very quickly and high-end espionage and surveillance powers are now in the hands of many countries and even individuals and small groups. Many employers outside of the military cannot comprehend the myriad of acronyms soldiers may initially struggle to stop using in their daily work. Some veterans may also struggle to explain how their experience can be applied in a non-military environment. One potential solution comes in an unlikely form: virtual reality, VR.
Briton Roger Penrose, a professor at the University of Oxford, will receive half of this year's prize for the discovery that black hole formation is a robust prediction of the general theory of relativity.
The acclaimed British scientist Stephen Hawking has put forward a theory that could resolve one of the most significant paradoxes facing theoretical physicists: what happens to physical information after it enters a black hole?
Since the pandemic began, people tell me they've been thinking a lot more about kindness. Maybe they've noticed the mutual aid groups that have sprung up around the world to help during lockdowns, or perhaps it's because the cessation of normal everyday life has forced them to reconsider their values and what really matters in life. Many different lab studies have found that people pay it forward. If they receive kindness, they are then kinder to others. For example, in a study conducted back in 2006, people were asked to complete a dull task on a computer before it was accidentally unplugged. For some participants, a stooge would kindly sort out the problem for them, saving them from wasting time starting all over again. Toddlers are of course famous for their tantrums. We tend to assume that at such a young age they can never understand another's perspective. They often appear unmoved if their sibling howls in distress, but experiments show that they are capable of kindness. Ordering lobster in a restaurant or serving it at a party is considered the height of gastronomic sophistication. But that hasn't always been the case. Lobster has worked its way up from humble beginnings to become a gourmet delicacy. Like lobsters, oysters have long been associated with fine dining and special occasions, largely due to their high price. But they haven't always enjoyed this status. Oysters used to be eaten by the poorest in society in the 19th century. Many fruits and vegetables used to be much scarcer than they are today. Certain fruits such as strawberries and raspberries used to only be available in the summer, but now we can buy them all year round. That changes the perception of luxury, says Peter Alexander, a senior researcher in global agriculture and food security at the University of Edinburgh.
Tens of thousands of environmental activists, including Greta Thunberg, the face of a global youth climate movement, have staged a rally outside Germany's parliament ahead of the general election this weekend to demand that politicians take stronger action to curb climate change.
While studying engineering at the Georgia Institute of Technology in the U.S., Dariani designed an outdoor purification system that removes particulate matter and other pollutants from the air. The device sucks in the polluting particles and collects them in a container, leaving clean air in its place. Air pollution also contributes to global warming. A major component of PM 2.5 is black carbon, which can absorb 1 million times more energy from the sun than carbon dioxide. Experts say reducing pollutants such as black carbon could help slow global warming and improve air quality. As the water receded and rebuilding efforts started, the sisters volunteered to help clear up grocery stores, where they saw vast amounts of food being thrown away. It felt perverse to Shirley, seeing that all that food was being thrown out at grocery stores, and then simultaneously there are families and homes, who are in need of food. As the Kingdom of Bhutan opens its borders, a Buddhist monk shares his secrets for understanding the nation's unique approach to happiness. Happiness is the concern of everyone, he said. Whether or not you acknowledge it, this is the purpose of every human being. The gentle release of scented smoke nourishes the mind and stimulates the senses, said Nato. That brings about pleasure and, in turn, mental tranquility. My own recipe for incense can do all that, but also free blocked energy and cure many kinds of sickness, too. Nationals leader Barnaby Joyce has warned winding back the nation's $50 billion fossil fuel export industry will mean less federal government revenue to support the aged, pension and disabled Australians, as his colleagues warn they won't be pushovers on any net zero emissions pact. A 15-year-old girl has been placed in an induced coma after she fell from a boat on Sydney's northern beaches and was struck by the propeller, suffering serious head injuries. Emergency services were called to the incident, involving a 4-meter runabout, at Narrabeen Lakes about 1:20 p.m. on Friday.
British police said Sunday they have arrested a man on suspicion of murdering Sabina Nessa, a primary school teacher killed as she walked in a London park. Nessa's death, as she went to meet a friend a few minutes from her home, has fueled concerns that women aren't safe on the streets of Britain's capital.
The airport on the Spanish island of La Palma shut down on Saturday because of an ash cloud spewing out of a volcano that has been erupting for a week, and scientists said another volcanic vent opened up, exposing islanders to possible new dangers. The intensity of the eruption that began September 19 has increased in recent days. Residents in Berlin, fed up with increasingly high rents, have secured a referendum on housing that could have reverberations across Europe. Housing activists want voters to support their push to expropriate more than 200,000 housing units from the city's largest landlords and transfer them to public ownership. The referendum takes place Sunday, along with Berlin's state elections and Germany's F. To construct 3D printed a home, the building is first designed digitally. Designers determine which aspects of the house can be 3D printed, typically, its parts like foundations and walls made of concrete, a material that lends itself well to 3D printing. The instructions are then sent to a robotic printer, which can either build the elements at the construction site or elsewhere. An inaccurate Canadian study suggesting an extremely high rate of heart inflammation after COVID-19 vaccines has been retracted due to a major mathematical error, but not before it spread like wildfire on anti-vaccination websites and social media.
Denmark's government has said it is joining forces with businesses to develop a digital passport that would show whether people have been vaccinated against the coronavirus, allowing them to travel and help ease restrictions on public life. Finance Minister told a news conference on Wednesday that in 3-4 months, a digital corona passport will be ready for use in